This is Navajo country, a desolate land, a striking beauty all of its own. Lines deep etched upon the face of Alvin Tsinijini, small flocks of sheep, scarcely large enough to sustain life, a way of life resembling that of biblical times. For Tsinijini and his fellow tribesmen, this was to be a very different day, different in a way he'd scarcely imagine. The day on which men in sheep bounced across the mesa to the canyon called Glen, men who were to bring the 20th century to Tsinijini. At 11:30 on the morning of October 15th, 1956, President Dwight D. Eisenhower, from the White House, triggered a blast far smaller than the atomic explosions now nearly so commonplace, but a blast that significantly affects nearly 1/5 of our nation's land area. Jarring the once silent southwestern desert land, the blast sent rocks tumbling 700 feet into the muddy Colorado at the spot where men will control that river's flow. Dissecting the parched lands of northern Arizona, the Colorado slices its way towards the distant sea. As in eons past, it finds its sources in the clear mountain freshets of the Colorado Rockies, picks up its major tributaries, the Green, Gunnison, and San Juan. Above Glen Canyon, the upper Colorado River Basin covers fully 110,000 square miles in 5 western states: Colorado, Wyoming, Utah, New Mexico, and Arizona. Whether roaring and brawling against steep canyon walls, or moving with a barely discernible ripple, the Colorado pushes with sullen force through Cataract and Canyon, becoming the silt-laden, untamed Rio Colorado of the desert Southwest, a river rich in beauty, rich in potential. For nearly 150 river miles in Utah and Arizona, the Colorado flows between massive rock walls, rising to a half-mile in height. This is the canyon called Glen by scientist explorer John Wesley Powell, first to travel the river in 1869. Glen Canyon, for the fringes of green Powell noted beneath its rust-red walls. Water, Colorado River water, could mean energy. Properly controlled and utilized could mean power, pulsing, flashing energy for cities and industries virtually unborn. Could mean irrigation for the thirsty crops of upstream valleys, life for the swelling population as yet unborn. Downstream, the Colorado River has already been put to man's use. Water and power for farms, cities, and industry. Hoover Dam, Davis Dam, Parker Dam, Imperial Dam, great dams to feed the surging growth of California and Arizona. Water from downstream dams has meant power for new industry, crops for new population, in areas that were little more than deserts scarcely 2 decades ago. And now that same pattern is in the making upstream in the upper basin states. Glen Canyon as it was. Glen Canyon as it will be. But transforming drawing to reality is a very big job indeed. And explaining the transformation of Glen Canyon to neighbor Alvin Tsinijini is a big job too. One fine morning, the Navajo tribesman left his hogan to jog over the desert to the big digging he'd been hearing about, to the dam site a dozen miles from his backcountry home. The cross-country wagon trail is typically rough. The new highway uncommonly smooth. Putting that road there was no small job. But you can't build the world's third highest dam without access roads. New highway projects on both sides of the Colorado began with earth-shattering blasts, notching a grade through the rock ridges. One fine new highway was blasted, bulldozed, and graded 25 miles across the Arizona landscape from the construction town of Page to U.S. Highway 89, forging a connection with the nearest railhead at Flagstaff, 135 miles distant. In the meantime, just 1,200 feet across the canyon from Page, but 200 miles around by existing roads and trails, another highway was completed, 75 miles to Kanab, Utah, in near record time. All-weather, permanent highways across the scenic Southwest. New interstate links, serving a $325 million project. By the time Tsinijini came to call, contractors at Glen Canyon had hired many of his neighbors for work at the dam site. And so, a competent Navajo-speaking guide was on hand to fit the old fellow with proper headgear. Access to the canyon floor, some 700 feet straight down beneath the cliffs, has been a major Glen Canyon problem. And Tsinijini gets a first-hand look at one of the rapid transit routes, dubbed Monkey Slide. Equally ingenious devices have been developed to move heavy equipment to strategic locations. From the start of the big job, trucks and heavy machinery needed on the canyon floor were lowered by cableways capable of supporting 25 tons. Lowered to the water's edge, trucks, dozers, jumbo drill rigs, and mucking machines were able to carve two 45-foot wide tunnels, wide as a house, through a half-mile of sandstone. Day and night, for weeks and months, the self-same cycle. Drill the rock, set the charges, blast the sandstone loose, load out the rock. Truck it and dump it, load it and truck it, round after round, shift after shift, through desert summer and desert winter. Men carve twin tunnels through the canyon walls to divert the flow of the Colorado while the dam is being constructed. Ticklish moments, too. There was the matter of the giant steel forms for lining the west side diversion tunnel. The man piloting that truck has to move his load with real skill. And the men who bored the tunnel and fabricated the steel were precision workers too. Crossing the Colorado to work on the upper rims or lower shores was a major problem demanding major solutions, ingenious solutions. Cables spanning the river provided initial transfer of men and materials from bank to bank. A 1,200-foot journey, 700 feet above water. A simple footbridge, the old-fashioned catwalk style, answered the needs of men who must cross the Colorado at the river's edge. But the bridge that proved most breathtaking, in a very literal sense, was the slender footbridge suspended 700 feet above the river, linking the canyon's east and west rims. Erection began with 100-foot-high towers on each windswept rim. Dead men were buried to anchor the guy cables, to hold the towers erect. And soon, cables were strung from tower to tower. Deck suspenders were hung from the big cables. Floor cables were hung. And then, steel mesh flooring was put in place, strong, flexible, making for a sturdy bridge, but somewhat frightening to pedestrians unaccustomed to walking on air, although routine to Glen Canyon's workers. We've talked much of bridges, says Tsinijini, and I understand them. But what of this dam? To wedge a curved 700-foot-high, 1,500-foot-long dam into the sandstone of Glen Canyon, huge notches called keyways must be cut in the rock walls on each side of the river. Engineered with care, the keyways must be drilled and blasted with mathematical precision, so the dam's curved walls can fit the cliff sides, tongue and groove fashion. Serving as anchors, the keyways must withstand much of the force exerted by the reservoir, which will press against the 600-foot face of the dam in Glen Canyon. In blazing summer sun and in whistling cold desert winds, men excavate the keyways. Meantime, the gentle curves of the spillway tunnels are carved through the age-old rock. Arching round the dam site, the spillway gives its clear indication of the route surplus water will take around the dam when the Glen Canyon Reservoir is filled. As Tsinijini and all visitors learn, it takes more than machines and high explosives to cut precisely into Glen Canyon's walls. High scalers, a special breed of men, are needed for the canyon conquest. Men who swing nonchalantly from their lines to trim the high cliffs by hand. Prying here, probing there, sending loose slabs of rock tumbling down, making certain the concrete structure man will build will truly and precisely fit into tailored rock walls. Want to move over a bit? Just push and swing, and out you go into space. Men against the sky, men against the rock wall, men, high scalers, engaged in a canyon conquest, handling a job that no machine can master. How to explain all this to a man accustomed to building his hogans of brush and mud? To build a dam, we take rock out of keyways, spillways, and diversion tunnels, put an enormous amount of material across the bedrock of the river. To create Glen Canyon Dam, to plug the river, to create a lake 186 miles long with a water surface of 163,000 acres, contractors will need 12 million sacks of cement. They'll haul in 3 million board feet of lumber, 5,000 tons of copper, 20,000 tons of aluminum, 130,000 tons of steel, and more than 7.5 million cubic yards of aggregate. In Utah, just north of the dam site, the concrete aggregate plant takes rock and sand from an ancient stream bed. Men wash and separate the material and start it on a 6-mile journey to a large stockpile close to the river. The material, which will eventually dam the Colorado, moves into aggregate separation towers and is held for later use. By means of a conveyor belt system moving beneath man-made mountains of sand and gravel, The aggregate is taken to the batching plant for mixing with carefully proportioned amounts of cement, aggregate, and water. This is only a pilot plant, comparatively small, mixing concrete for tunnel linings and other immediate jobs. When concrete placing at the dam begins, the batch plant will be 6 times as big. On the average, a bulk cement truck will arrive at the dam every 40 minutes, night and day. Concrete will be placed by buckets, riding a strong, thick, 4-inch diameter cable. Twin cableways, slung from movable towers, will trundle 1,000 feet up or downstream so that concrete can be dumped with pinpoint precision at any spot on the dam. Final and most difficult step ensuring the smooth flow of materials to Glen Canyon Dam site has been erection of one of the nation's most spectacular bridges, a 1,028-foot steel arch span, highest steel arch bridge in the world. High scalers drilled and blasted for the skewbacks to pin the graceful span against the canyon walls. Concrete for the forms. A sight increasingly familiar as concrete work gets into swing on the dam itself. At a steel mill far from the land of Tsinijini, far from the canyon men seek to conquer, men are prefabricating a bridge. Prefabricating a mammoth bridge and shipping its girders, trusses, rivets, and braces to Flagstaff. Unloaded in a rail yard specially enlarged to serve Glen Canyon's needs. Hauled in over the highway specially built to serve the dam site. Here come the girders for Glen Canyon's bridge, for the second vehicular crossing of the Colorado along 640 miles of river between Hoover Dam and Moab, Utah. A mammoth girder, dwarfed by the vast canyon, first of many prefabricated for the arch across the river barrier. A far cry from the erector set some of these men played with not so many years ago. In with the pin. In with the rivets. In with the girders. Steel, and yet more steel, crossing the river. Tied into place with red-hot rivets. A picture typical of American progress. A picture growing familiar to old Tsinijini. Only one thing's unchanging. That's the heat of the desert. The sun is hot, the thermometer at 110. Not too warm for my bones, smiles old Tsinijini. But heat, there to finish. Finish on schedule. The last steel for the arch was slowly, proudly, draped with our nation's flag on a warm August morning. No time for a ceremony here, although officials, newsmen, and spectators were watching. For after the final pin was in place and the graceful arch complete, there was decking to add. Decking, deck columns, and concrete roadway, sidewalks, and paint. Paint for a silvery span, ribbon above river. A new year began when the big bridge was finished. A new year, 1959. Journeying home to the past, Tsinijini clip-clops through the future, through the streets of Page, newest of all cities in this southwestern country. The city rested from the desert. First came the trailers, then the prefabs, and now roomy homes with air conditioners. First for the builders, then for the permanent residents who will operate dam and power plant in years to come. Shrubs, even lawns, beginning to show green. A permanent community, dividend of Glen Canyon, will remain rooted here after men by the thousand have dug and dynamited, rigged cables, built bridges, placed their dam across the Colorado, conquered the canyon, made use of the water. Yes, a school for newcomers, children of men who are damming the river. A school for children who find an Indian in his team passing strange, but not as strange as Tsinijini finds the big job a dozen miles from his hogan. Yatahe, friend Tsinijini. Hello and goodbye in your Navajo tongue. A way of life passes. A new way is born. Men conquer a canyon, and with it, the future.